This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Thursday. It's September 7th, 2023. Thank you for joining us. We're here at The Truth Central with a podcast every weekday. First story I want to cover today has to do with this Ukraine war. I think people are beginning to realize that the war is just a disaster for Ukraine, for NATO, for Biden. The war should never have been fought. There's a article out in the AmericanMind.org, The Last Ukrainian, which essentially is saying that Zelensky, of course, making huge amounts of money on this war, as the other oligarchs. And we reported yesterday several of the oligarchs. Kolomoisky was finally arrested. These are all related to Biden. The corruption in Ukraine is just legendary. So Russia has essentially gotten most of the territory Russia wants, controlling the sea, controlling Donbass, which is the area close to Russia. And the Ukrainians are essentially the ones who volunteered. Many of those are now gone, dead. The country is being laid waste to. Russia is destroying the cities. Russia is cutting off all of the infrastructure, water, electricity, all power. You can't survive in these cities. Ukraine's going to get ready to go into winter here, like we all are in the Northern Hemisphere. And the corruption in the armed forces is massive. So he fired his defense minister. He got Kolomoisky arrested. But this is nothing compared to what really is going on for the number of people who are just stealing the money that we're sending over there. And this war shouldn't be fought in the beginning. The Ukrainians have suffered an enormous amount of the U.S. estimate. It is about 70,000 dead, 150 to 200,000 wounded out of 5.5 million military-aged men in Ukraine. That's more dead in 18 months than we lost in the entire Vietnam War, which went on forever, 1960, probably 63, 64 until 1974, 10 years. And this war it's 18 months. It's a vicious war. According to German medical supply, Autobach, which makes prosthetics, the number of amputees now stands at close to 50,000. Ukraine's preparing for 1.5 million disabled persons as a result of the war. This is a country that is being destroyed. And we're not the only ones winning are the arms manufacturers and the arms dealers. They're getting their payday, just like the pharmaceutical companies got their payday under COVID. There's increasing evidence that the COVID was manufactured in a laboratory, and even more questioning about how it was released. Of course, the official narrative is that there's very few deaths from the vaccine. Well, again, we continue to have these stories about these athletes who are dropping over. I think another one was reported yesterday. I'm going to try to find it here in a second. But by the way, this war has no future. Russia will only continue to escalate. Will only continue to escalate the war if we continue to supply more weapons. We supply F-16s. Russia's going to escalate. Russia has right now control of the country. The defensive positions are strong. Ukraine is now sending in untrained troops with weapons that they don't effectively know how to utilize. And Russia is not going to lose this war. You cannot have Putin take the loss. He won't take the loss. Chris, I think you've got a clip from our brilliant Secretary of State, this guy named Blinken. I'm going to try not to blink while you play Blinken. Want to cue him up? Let's hear what he has to say about Ukraine.
The United States and Ukraine have forged a partnership that is stronger than ever and growing every day. We will continue to stand by Ukraine's side, and today we're announcing new assistance totaling more than $1 billion in this common effort. That includes $665.5 million in new military and civilian security assistance. In total, we committed over $43 billion in security assistance since the beginning of the Russian aggression. The new security funding that we're announcing today will also be bolstered by the arrival of U.S. Abrams tanks this fall and by training for Ukrainian pilots on F-16s in the United States, complementing training that is already underway in Europe.
This guy's delusional. I mean, it's a joke. Except, where do we get the $1 billion? Well, we just printed it up. We didn't print anything. We just made notations, electronic notations, and the Department of Treasury and the Federal Reserve agrees. And so we send those off to Ukraine. And when it gets to Ukraine, who knows where it goes because we don't account for it. And which oligarchs get it to beef up their dakas and on the Black Sea or in Cyprus. I mean, this thing is a complete corrupt scandal. And the idea of pushing NATO to the edge of Russia is, in geopolitical terms, suicidal because every nation state needs buffers. We want, like we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. I keep pointing this out. We objected to it because in our hemisphere, Russia was putting nuclear weapons in Cuba, 90 miles off the shore of Miami. Well, we wouldn't tolerate that. It was in our zone of influence. Chris, what do you think about this Ukraine war? Do you have any comments on it? I mean, this was one I don't see an end to it when we continue to send weapons and we continue to do what we're doing.
It's funny when it was discussed during World War II and before that, war is good business. The idea is we have to funnel money around to the defense producers, overproduce other things. This is the idea of how a war could actually help an economy. We've seen the exact opposite actually since World War II. If you really think about it, we've had economic issues with each of the conflicts we've been involved in. Of course, they weren't technically direct wars, most of them. We can get into the semantics at another time. What we're looking at right now, and as Mitch McConnell actually said to Robert F. Kennedy, and if you didn't hear this speech or this part of the conversation, you could find it on a recent The Truth Central. Kennedy said that McConnell told him, "Oh, don't worry about the money. Much of that's being funded into our own people, people who are producing defense, people who are actually fighting, or well, technically working over there, if you will. That's an issue. We're printing up money. We're funneling it to fund a war, a proxy war with Russia, and now we see." A president who doesn't even visit his own disaster areas until he's prodded for way too long, hasn't seen East Palestine yet, by the way, because he hasn't had time, and funneling loads of money to these interests where we now find his family's been doing business, or excuse me, allegedly doing business, and we see where and why everything's happening. So don't ask even what's going on, ask why this is going on.
Well, it's going on because people are making money. And you're right. I've just pulled out a file. I remember, as you were talking, I remember General Medley Butler. I don't think very many people know who he was. In the 1930s, he was one of our great military commanders. He fought wars in the Philippines, etc. And he came back and he said, all this war is nonsense. It's just for profit. It's just for people making money. And he became very, very popular in the 1930s because we went through World War I and lost a lot of people in World War I. We didn't want to fight World War II. And I think the American people have the great sense that these wars there's Smedley Butler, very decorated and very outspoken. And I someday would like to write a book on him. Great, great general, great human being, opposed a war. Let's continue to move on. By the way, today, if anyone saw the Tucker Carlson with Larry Sinclair, I guess now the story of Obama being gay is now hitting more mainstream. I think I was first reporting on that about 2008, and people, everything I've interviewed Larry Sinclair multiple times. I've written about it. It's with WorldNet Daily, and finally it's catching on. Now I guess it's catching on because they're preparing for Michelle to run, and they're going to try to prepare the turf for her. And this is a very strange couple in terms of their marriage. Everything about Obama is strange. We really don't know who the guy is. His life story doesn't make any sense. And his biography, Dreams from My Father. Um, it- I'm convinced Bill Ayers wrote the book. I've
Uh,
interviewed Bill Ayers.
I'm convinced this guy was handpicked from Harvard onward, or maybe even beforehand.
I think from birth. I think
Right.
I think in the 70s, when he was born in the 60s, the CIA was already looking for a African American or person of color or whatever to be president of the United States about when Obama surfaced. And the idea was they would control him as an asset. Obama's life story reads like a CIA legend, in other words, made up. And you can't verify much of it. Believe me, I've spent a lot of time doing it. I think I'll create a Substack and put all my Barack Obama stuff on it pretty quickly if Michelle's going to run. I think people will want to go back and read all that stuff over again. I wrote the book, Where's the Birth Certificate? Well, we found the birth certificate that was the one from which Obama copied his, and it was proved out by Sheriff Arpaio, who had 2 European forensic labs verify that this was the document from which the birth certificate was copied. Well, the Obamas are coming back. The Obamas have been in the background, probably running the Biden administration. I think Obama thinks he can go for his 4th term with Michelle. Okay, let's go on to the next stories because we could easily spend more time on this one. I want to cover a story about Harvard, my alma mater, where I got my PhD. Harvard is now being ranked absolutely the worst, the bottom, actually the top, scoring 0 out of a possible 100 in its support of free speech. And what this is a group that the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression ranks colleges based upon how many of the professors or students are suppressed or brought forward for discipline because of things they've said or written. And actually, Harvard had a negative score of -10. It was so bad. But this is a disgrace. I mean, if Harvard is so woke and so into this absolutely ridiculous ideology of, we've got to have everything is racism, it's Marxism. This is pure and simple Marxism. And I've been trying to get this across to people for years now. But again, we're going to cover a couple of climate stories here in a minute. But the climate hoax is with us. Let's cover those right away. Let's go right into that. China. China is having an extremely difficult time. Right now, China is going into a severe economic downturn. China is basically has the 4th straight month in August where it was suffering dropping exports. It's got a property crisis. Its imports are struggling. China has struggled to sustain a wave of overseas demand for Chinese goods that carried it through much of the 3 years of the COVID pandemic, particularly as Western customers tilted their spending towards services and away from goods. But higher borrowing rates in the United States and other developing countries have hit consumer appetites. This immediately hits China's ability to outbound shipments of Chinese manufactured goods. They're down about 8%, almost 9%. So China is suffering about a 10% drop, let's just say, in exports. Their imports are down because the economy is struggling, and major property interests in China are collapsing, going bankrupt. So there is essentially factory activity is in a 5th straight month of contraction. China's going through a recession right now. Now, that's going to be big news because, first of all, it's going to put Xi, the guy who rules China, in jeopardy. China is not by any means a free society, and you stay in power only so long as you continue to produce for people and remain the guy most feared. Well, if Xi starts suffering economically, the Chinese people going into winter are going to have economic distress. This is not a country with its huge population that you want to see in revolt. I think it'd be very dangerous. And the other thing I want to report on China is the duplicity. China's coal production is way up. China is accelerating coal-fired power plant construction. Now, what's so important about this is that the Biden administration has placed all this emphasis on cooperating with the People's Republic of China on greenhouse gas reductions of emissions, which is the whole climate change nonsense. And you've got John Kerry over there. At the same time, they're building more and more power plants for coal. They want to be China's surge in coal. I'm just going to read a little bit of this article. This article was a very good article. It was published in, let me see where it was published in the Federalist, which is a good publication by Chuck DeVore, who follows this and has written quite a bit about this. What Chuck was saying is that he said the China's surge in coal-fired power plant construction was about developing energy resiliency to prepare for war. Their green energy efforts supported the electrification of the transportation sector via coal, and their wind power electric vehicles and trains are designed to displace imported oil, but the military utility of China's environmental claims is cloaked with the added propaganda of a green patina. So here comes John Kerry, on August 30th, 2022, about a year ago, was in China as a U.S. Special Envoy on Climate Change. This guy Kerry, he was, State Department when he's over with Iran, making sure they get nuclear weapons, and we're sending him airplanes full of cash. I wrote Unfit for Command with John O'Neill. I was co-author with John O'Neill, Unfit for Command, showing Kerry's disgraceful record in the Vietnam War. I think we made an impact in Kerry not winning the presidency in 2004. But the point is, 2000, in 2008. No, 2004 was Kerry. 2008 was Obama. We did 2004 with Kerry. 2008, I wrote Abomination, trying to expose Obama. And I was on Obama's being gay or being raised by Frank Marshall Davis, who was an outright communist, about all of his communist associations in schools that he attended, some of which he actually may have been there for a while. Columbia, nobody can seem to find any record of him. At any rate, well, when Kerry, as climate czar, went to China in 2022, he basically was saying they were outperforming their commitments to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Well, at the same time, China's coal-fired electricity generation rose 57%. China's consuming more than half of the world's coal. China's carbon footprint is up a massive amount of coal use, with 243 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity permitted or under construction in 2022. So all the reality of China is that China is a totalitarian state producing cheap goods for the United States, undercutting U.S. manufacturing, lying to Kerry, who believes every lie every anti-American two-bit dictators ever told him, falling in love with Iran, falling in love with China. They're anti-American. They're right up Kerry's alley. So China has imported 10 to 11 million barrels of oil a day, and they are even doing Fischer-Tropsch processing, which is taking coal and making it into petroleum products. Oil is not fossil fuel. It's abiotic. And I've covered this extensively in the book about the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. There's still some people running around who think they've got dinosaur fluid in their gasoline tanks. This book is done extremely well, and it outlines for you the entire nature of the climate hoax, which is carbon dioxide has actually decreased in the last 600 million years. We've gone through ice ages where we've had more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we do today. We're in an interglacial warming period. The sun, that yellow thing up in the sky, which I continually say is not a tree ornament. It's not some just bright light up there for amusement. It's a source of our heat and our light. When it burns hotter, we tend to get a warming period, like the medieval warming period. When it's cooler, we get a little ice age, like in the 1700s. the Earth is not dependent on carbon dioxide for temperature. Carbon dioxide follows warming. It doesn't cause it. When we have more carbon dioxide, we have more abundant trees. The Earth is more green. We exhale carbon dioxide. All of these neo-Marxist concepts are anti-human. They hate people. They're depopulation. That's what they're pushing, is depopulation. And it's frightening. The second book I've written on this, which will be out in October, we pushed up the date. I can't wait for this one to be out, about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. I explained to you the entire political philosophy. These people live in a different world. They live in a different entire idea of reality. They're postmodernists. Baudrillard was a postmodern. The French are really, they have the top postmodernists. They go sit around the cafes, the coffee houses or little cafes in Paris and intellectualize. Well, they think that all reality is subjective. And so therefore, we need to oppose capitalism because Rousseau said, all men are born free and everywhere we're in chains. We need to eliminate capitalism. It's this work. It's this productivity. The Marcuse, who is one of the Frankfurt School, very popular in the 60s. I remember when I was at Harvard, Marcuse, everybody was reading Marcuse. He basically wanted to, he was a German Jew who escaped Hitler, came to the United States, hung out in California among the Hollywood crowd, and wrote books hating America. And we let him do it. We invited him, saved him here, and let him bring his communism here. And he began this whole, if you read the next book on this, it's amazing because they embraced Marquis de Sade and said his uninhibited sexuality was liberating. Well, in the 1960s, this became sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and was the beginning of the attack on the family, a very conscious attack, cultural Maoism, which we're going through right now. This woke is Maoism. It's the same thing that happened in the Cultural Revolution in China, where they don't believe in God, they don't believe in the family, they don't believe in traditional values. They believe they can create their own utopia by imagining it with these values that they think that they can materialize. Like, let's imagine a world with no borders. Why should there be borders? People are human beings. They should be able to go wherever they want to. Why do we need families? Just one husband and wife for the entire time? They're going to get bored with each other. Let's have multiple parents. Let's have society raise the children. These are ideas which go back to ancient times. They were being discussed in Plato's Republic, some of these ideas. And they don't work because it's not the way human beings function. But John Lennon, let's imagine a world without borders. Let's imagine a world without God. Oh, if we didn't have God, we wouldn't fight about religions. We wouldn't have religious wars. But how about if we imagine a world without John Lennon? And that's what's happening here in China with the John Kerrys of the world, who are saying China is excelling on its goals to reduce carbon emissions when China is doing the exact opposite. China is getting all the oil it wants, bypassing Taiwan. Taiwan can't block the transportation of oil any longer to China. China's moved into this new alliance with the BRICS nations. They brought in Saudi Arabia, UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Iran, which are some of the biggest oil producers in the world. China's preparing to use all the hydrocarbon fuels they can get because they know they work. Well, we're committing suicide by eliminating them. Next story, because this is a flow of stories I put together today I want to continue following. But what we're finding, if we continue to pursue this agenda, is a couple of things. One is we're finally realizing that this electric vehicle nonsense is a hoax. Now, there's a very good article on this that I'm covering today, and it's written, I believe, by Michael Snyder. No, this is by Nick Giambruno, who is writing. He writes in Doug Casey's International Man, and what he's saying is that if we really look at the electricity that would be required if everybody had electric vehicles, it's going to be a massive amount of additional electricity that needs to be produced. These cars aren't magical. Just because they're electric doesn't mean that they don't use hydrocarbon fuels, either to get the minerals that go into the battery mined or to produce the electricity that you charge them with. And our electric grid can't handle this volume of new electricity. But Biden plans to have 50% of the cars sold in the U.S. be electric by 2030. The grid in most places aren't going to be able to. This article estimates charging an electric vehicle every day amounts to running 25 refrigerators in your home. That's how much electricity you're using. And this is Congressman Thomas Massie, who's an electrical engineer, and he's been arguing with this guy Buttigieg, who is another real winner, another guy he's now Secretary of Transportation. Between him and John Kerry, I don't know who flies around more. John Kerry with his private jets and all the rest of his lifestyle, just like Al Gore. At any rate, he's saying that Thomas Massie is saying this is a dangerous fantasy based on political science, not sound engineering. But still, the governments, media, academia, large corporations, and celebrities they're all touting this imminent transition to electric vehicles as if it was proclaimed by God. And they take the fossil fuels. This article writes, when the average person hears fossil fuels, they think of a dirty technology that belongs in the 1800s. Many believe they're burning dead dinosaurs to power their cars. It constantly amazes me the popular delusions that can infect human beings, and much easier to infect them with a delusion than when truth. Truth is hard, requires thinking, it requires learning, requires education, it requires knowing math, knowing science, being able to evaluate and argue things, and understanding when you're being lied to. Now, he gives 3 reasons in this article. EVs are not green. The central premise is that EVs help to save the planet from carbon dioxide because they use electricity instead of gas. Well, again, hydrocarbons generate over 60% of the electricity in the United States. And there's an excellent chance that oil, coal, or gas is behind the electricity going into your EV. It should not take a genius to realize this. Okay, so the EVs don't reduce carbon emissions, they rearrange them to produce the electricity that goes into the charging, to mine the batteries, the rare earth minerals for the batteries. Extracting and processing the exotic materials needed to make EVs requires tremendous power in remote locations, which only hydrocarbons can provide. Reason number 2, EVs can't compete without government support. None of this, wind, solar, none of it does. The wind turbines, when they don't work, become junk. And they're very hard to recycle. And this is, again, something that's not thought about. The solar panels become junk, hard to recover. So according to Wall Street, U.S. taxpayers will subsidize EVs by $393 billion in the coming years. We're going to have endless inflation as long as we print money. And the middle class is going to get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. I'm finding people talking to, people about groceries. What does $100 buy? One of the members of our family had to get electrician and a bill for $1,000. I'm finding people are charging $1,000 for things that used to be hundreds and thinking nothing of it. And yet people are finding a way to pay, but it's on credit cards largely right now. And the society is losing jobs massively. Layoffs are occurring. I'm going to cover that in just a second. But the EVs can't compete without having government subsidies. The EV market is a giant mirage artificially propped up by extensive government intervention. And number 3, EVs are about controlling you. They're spying machines. They collect an unimaginable amount of data on you, which governments can easily access. Cars generate about 25 gigabytes of data every hour in EVs. So you could integrate this into a data collection, which can monitor every place you've been, every place you've gone. This and your cell phones will control you. So EVs are not green. They cannot compete with gas cars without enormous government support, and are probably a crucial piece of the emerging high-tech control grid that's being built, where we can be surveyed in everything we do. Along with 15-minute cities, carbon credits, central bank digital currencies, digital IDs, phasing out hydrocarbons and meat, vaccine passports, an ESG social credit system, and the war on farmers, EVs are an integral part of the Great Reset. And this is the dystopian future the global elite has envisioned for mankind. This Great Reset is a high-tech form of feudalism in which we will be the serfs. Okay, now I want to cover one more story before we quit today, and going to try to not go too much over time. But the story is the American cities are just deteriorating. America is rapidly becoming unsafe. This was a fairly shocking story, but well documented, very well documented. And when you take a look at the cities, New York City has so many rats. We've got rat tourism right now that some of these sites people are being taken to see how infested it is. There's something like 3 million rats estimated to be living in New York City. Tourism, San Francisco. People come from overseas expecting to enjoy San Francisco. So here's a report on the second day in San Francisco. A group of tourists from Malta contemplating cutting their trip short and returning to Europe after a brazen smash and grab that occurred in broad daylight within a mere 10-minute window. Numerous groups of tourists visiting a beach in San Francisco had all their belongings stolen from their cars, including their passports, while at the ocean for just a few minutes. Same beach, another European family enjoying a day by the ocean fell prey to a car break-in. The shocking footage, which was captured on Instagram by a journalist, Arisli Pakeko. I don't know who, but I have not seen it. But it's being reported, documents robbery victims, their car trunks vandalized, shattered glass around the. I mean, it's just robberies. There's videos of Beverly Hills, Rodeo Drive. I remember going to the Wilshire Hotel on Rodeo Drive as recently as maybe 15 years ago. It was beautiful. It was luxury, safe. Today, the retailers are all boarded up there, and it's becoming a ghost town. I did watch this video, and it showed a lot of the really high luxury shops just shuttered down. They're done. It was shocking. I mean, in Washington, D.C., there's a staggering 670 reported carjackings in 2023 so far, 100% increase in the offense across the United States compared to the same period last year, 100% increase. But the Democratic-dominated city council is on vacation until September 15th. It's not going to return early to solve the problem. Baltimore, here's a report from Fox 45 News is deeply frustrated. This woman, but she can't keep away to keep her 14-year-old daughter from stealing cars. A Baltimore man, I mean, this just goes on and on. Our cities are becoming unsafe. They're crime, these democratic hellholes. This is what the woke culture produces. It's destructive. It produces negativity. It doesn't encourage economic activity. If people don't believe in God, if they don't believe in morals, if there's no law enforcement, the criminals are going to rule these cities, and they're going to become unsafe. And people are going to die. People are going to be economic distress. The point I'm trying to convey to you is this is not by accident. This is by design. That's why I'm so desperate to get these books out. It's by design. And as Marxism affects us, we are being dismantled. I want to wrap up with a couple points. Please look at our sponsors. Take a look. You can get a free copy of this book. This book is being very well reviewed. It's just getting introduced. But I've wrote a book about what's coming in the global economic depression, and it is developing. I think this book will be very popular in the next few weeks as the stock market begins to crash. If you call the number on our homepage, you can get a free copy of this book from Swiss America. Please talk to Swiss America. If you've got your IRAs, your 401ks, and gold and silver, you need to get them out because the stock market could crash 10,000 points in a day. People are saying I'm looking younger. Well, I'm 77 years old. Take a look at my Vital C, this Carbon 60. We're just beginning on this. I've written a book with Live Longer and Better. It's on the Carbon 60. We're just introducing this. We have a new website. I'm going back into the telemedicine, a new website going to be called GetLongevity.meds.com with Chris Burries, who is the co-founder of My Vital C. He worked with the people at Rice University who discovered Carbon 60. It is a remarkable molecule and does have longevity principles to it. We will also be introducing another telemed site, which is called GetRxMedsNow.com. That'll be up in the next, by the beginning of October, and it will let you be able to get prescription medications with a phone call with a doctor phone call. Prescriptions can be e-prescribed to your local pharmacy, and you can pay for the prescriptions with insurance or discount cards. The service is not going to participate in the economics of the prescriptions. We're just going to provide you at a reasonable cost access to a doctor who can prescribe to you what you need. And we'll be rolling these out in the fourth quarter, starting in October. We're going to be doing a lot of transformations here on the Truth Central. I'm going to be doing more interviews. I want to truly thank you for your support. And ask you, if you like the show, please pass it on to others. Like it. Do all that you can to repost it. Let others know about it. I had considered being retired. And with what's going on today, I decided I'd come back and work twice as hard. I'm not retired at all. I'll be working diligently to stop this woke agenda, to reverse the socialism and communism of America, and to get us back onto the principles of God and the productive principles of free enterprise. Chris, any final comments as we wrap up? We've covered a lot today.
It's quite a bit. On that EV thing you were talking about, how the government's trying to control us, we were tipped off as soon as I'll say the New York State Legislature was talking about this, and then there were other states going on around or afterwards.
Right.
The idea was, how are we going to tax people a little bit more? How are we going to do this? Because now we can't throw a gas tax in, since the federal government and our fellow Democrats want to move to electric vehicles. So here's what we'll do. We'll monitor everywhere you go and tax you for every mile you drive. That's the tip-off. That was like, hey, now they can tell. Now with electric vehicles, they're designed to make sure that the government knows everywhere we go. It's not like the Easy Passes don't say that very often. Oh, the Easy Pass tunnels and toll booths don't do the same thing. But at least they can track you every second, every moment you're driving your car and you're parked and it's parked.
That's right. It's all real-time monitoring.
Yes.
And then in the cities, they'll have monitors, and if you drive your electric vehicle or any vehicle that doesn't meet their specifications into a part of the city that you're not supposed to be, you'll be extra taxed. That's what they're doing in London.
Right. And why are people so gung-ho about doing this? I understand the emissions thing. Here's another issue. A lot of the gas-powered cars are lowering their emissions and trying to comply and do a little better. I don't mind the idea of these companies building cars that'll go 45, 35 miles to the gallon. I like that because it saves me gas money. I don't want the government monitoring everywhere I drive. I don't care if I don't want it to know I'm going to ShopRite or where I am in every single way, because they're going to find a way to use it against you. They can stop your car. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here. So I'm going to let it go right now, but we should have been tipped off a long time ago.
We're going to cover a lot more of this. You'll have much
Right.
more opportunity. I mean,
Yeah.
the surveillance state is here,
Yes.
and the totalitarians want to use it, and they've engineered the conditions where they can probably put it into place if we don't wake up to it. We need to be awake, not woke.
Yeah.
I just fear the judgment of God. If we need to follow Second Chronicles. The Bible instructs us what to do in times like these. Second Chronicles 7:14. Please join me. I'm getting down on my knees, asking God to forgive us for letting it get here, letting God be taken out of the schools, letting millions of babies being killed in the womb, letting communism dominate our schools, our newspapers, this woke agenda, which is schizophrenic, insanity, transgenders in the schools. Transgenders make no sense even to the lesbians, gays. We're living in insanity, and the inmates want to be in control of the asylum, and the oligarchs of the World Economic Forum are happy to let them do so as long as they destroy America. There's millions and billions of dollars available to destroy America. You want to set up a communist organization, Act Blue will fund you. Money will pour in. The Maoists and Marxists who lead these organizations buy themselves mansions. You want to fight for God, or you want to fight for the principles of America, you'll probably go broke. That's the evil that is now dominating, and it's what 2 Chronicles 7:11 says is if we get down on our knees and ask God to repent for our sins, letting it get to this point, God will hear our prayers and heal the land. We need the land to be healed. We need God's intervention. We need the grace of God to turn this around. I'm confident we can do it because God will win. And if we implore God with our beg for repentance, I believe God, the more that join, the more God sees this can be turned around. And that's why I've decided not to be retired. Dr. Jerome Corsi, this is Thursday, September 7th, 2023. We'll be back tomorrow. thetruthcentral.com. Thank you for joining us.